Modern Man in Search of a Soul is a 1933 collection of essays by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. Jung was born in 1875, the son of a pastor. His mother was probably mentally ill, at least some of the time, and his childhood was unhappy. He originally wanted to be a Christian minister, but after studying philosophy, he turned to medicine. After graduating, he worked at a psychiatric hospital, and in 1905 became a lecturer at Zurich University. In 1907, he met Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis. Freud was nearly 20 years his senior, but recognised Jung's prodigious talent, and for a while considered him his heir. Freud secured Jung's appointment as president of the newly founded International Psychoanalytical Association. Nevertheless, the two men parted ways after Jung's 1912 book, The Psychology of the Unconscious, showed his views to be irreconcilable with Freud's. Modern Man in Search of a Soul sounds as if it ought to be an existential work, something like Kierkegaard's The Concept of Dread, or Camus's The Myth of Sisyphus. But it's actually a collection of essays on topics relating to clinical psychology, all but one of which were originally delivered as lectures at the Psychological Club in Zurich, where Jung began to gain followers after the fairly traumatic and professionally isolating break with Freud. There are 11 chapters in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, and Freud appears throughout, although it's obvious that Jung's thinking has moved on. Chapter 6, Freud and Jung Contrasts, provides the most explicit treatment of their relation. Jung thinks that psychology is too undeveloped as a science to be able to pronounce on correct theories. The best we can achieve, he says, is true expression. True expression consists in giving form to what is observed. Sometimes Freudianism works, he says. Sometimes it doesn't. It works best on people who are like Freud himself. By his avowal of what he has found in himself, Jung says, Freud has assisted at the birth of a great truth about man. He has devoted his life and strength to the construction of a psychology which is a formulation of his own being. Which might sound like a snide dismissal, but isn't. Even when I deal with empirical data, Jung adds a little later, I am necessarily talking about myself. Jung's congenial personality always shines through. He's anxious to avoid dogma and eager to underline how much work remains to be done. The first chapter on dream analysis is typical. I have no theory about dreams, he says. I do not know how dreams arise. I share all my readers' prejudices against dream interpretation as being the quintessence of uncertainty and arbitrariness. But, on the other hand, I know that if we meditate on a dream sufficiently long and thoroughly, if we take it about with us and turn it over and over, something almost always comes out of it. He thinks that psychotherapeutic interpretations and cures should be a matter of dialogue between therapist and patient, and that if the process is to be effective, both must be equally open to new insights and to change. A successful outcome must be a matter of consensus. Chapter 9, The Basic Postulates of Analytical Psychology, takes us to the root of his thought. He believes 19th century materialism has hijacked our thinking about the mind, and that for anyone who wants to appear sophisticated and up to date, a materialistic outlook is indispensable. The modern preference for physical grounds of explanation, he says, leads to the view that the psyche is nothing but a product of biochemical processes. As for a modern scientific psychology, which starts from the mind as such, there simply is none. In Chapter 5, The Stages of Life, he claims roughly that life divides into 4 stages, and that the problems of the last 2 are very different from those of the first. He tells us that among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there's not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life, before adding, this of course has nothing whatsoever to do with a particular creed or membership of a church. Much of Jung's mature psychology appears fully developed in this book. His theory of a collective unconscious gets a good airing in Chapter 8, Psychology and Literature. We mean by collective unconscious, he tells us, a certain psychic disposition shaped by the forces of heredity. From it, consciousness has developed. In many ways, Modern Man in Search of a Soul can be read as an introduction to Jung's thought. When he died in 1961 at the age of 85, Jung was already widely recognised as one of the 20th century's major thinkers. Not only has his reputation continued to grow, but in some ways his star might nowadays be thought to have eclipsed Freud's. Every educated person ought to know something about him, and this is a very good place to start.